بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم و به نستعین. عرض سلام و احترام دارم شاگردان معزز. السلام علیکم و رحمت الله و برکاته. امید دارم که حال همه شما خوب باشد، موفق و مؤید باشید. Today, in pursuit of our previous session, that we talked about the significance or importance of formulating research problem. So today we are particularly talking about the steps involved in formulation of research problem. So we are particularly going through every individual step in order to contribute to ourselves to formulate a proper research problem. So this is again chapter 4. So our main discussion is on steps of formulating research problem. So the contents that we are covering today in our session include steps in formulating a research problem. So initially we are going through the number of steps that they are really significant and essential that they are helping us in formulating a research problem. And second, we particularly make ourselves acquainted with how to formulate research objectives. So it is really important to make a distinction between research problem and objectives. I mean, by the end of this session, you will clearly understand the difference between research objectives and research question and moreover research problem. So these are the three concepts that they are very close to each other, but they are not really identical or the same. And the third point to which we are pointing is the importance of establishing operational definition. So of course we are offering lots of definitions. So definition are basically given in order to introduce a particular concept to the others. But here we have got a different types of definition, which is called operational definition or definitions. Operational definitions are really important and they are idiosyncratic and they are specific to our work. For example, we may use some concepts, some terminologies that the kind of understanding that we are providing only applies to our research investigation. So maybe the meaning or the concept or the and even we can say the implication which is associated with the definitions that we are providing for terminologies are absolutely different from their legal definition or from their definition given in dictionaries. So these are operational definitions that they are really operationalized or used in our research investigation. So key terms are not very much different. Again, I have brought the number of terminologies and key terms used in the same chapter. So concepts, dissect, operational definition, qualitative research, and moreover quantitative research, research objectives, and then research problem, study area, study population, subject area, validity, and variable and working definition or operational definition. So these are the key terms or the terminologies. By the end of this session, we will understand each of these key term and the implication of each of these operational work key terms. So the aim of the session, what is the goal or the overall aim of this session? So because this session talks about basically the number of steps associated or involved in formulation of a proper or appropriate research problem. So for that, we are basically by the end of this session, we will understand all these things. So for that reason, we can say the main or primary aim of this session is to elaborate or give us enough information about the steps of formulating research problem. Or generally, we know how many steps are really essential in order to be able to compose or to be able to produce an appropriate research problem. So we start from steps in formulating a research problem. What is the first step? So probably you are familiar with the nature of research problem. We already elaborated about research problem. You know the meaning of research problem, the scope and use in function of research problem. So we assimilated research problem basically to, for example, destination or even to the foundation of a building or a foundation of a superstructure. So I am sure that we are quite familiar with the notion of research problems. So today we are basically talking about the number of steps involved in the production of research problems. So the first step is number one, identify a broad field or subject area of interest to you. Right. So, for example, the first question I am asking you, how are you able to formulate or compose a research problem? So, where should we start? Where should we begin? So, the specific answer here is first of all, we identify a broad field of study. So what it means is, for example, you as students of language and literature, you would like to carry out an investigation, but you don't know where should you start from. Now you just think about, for example, that broad area. So it means that whether you would like to carry out your investigation about language variation, maybe about corruption and traffic system, maybe about the political system, so whatever. So once you're identifying a very broad area, a general area, so that is the very first step that you decide, okay, I have to carry out an investigation about language. So this is, you are done with the identification of broad area. But you have identified that broad area, but it is not clear exactly what dimension or aspect of language you are working on right now. So that is the very first step that you have to decide or identify a very broad area. Once you are done with that, then you are moving on to the next steps. So now, how you are identifying that broad area. So here, ask yourself, what is that really interests me as a professional? Suppose that you are a professional person. You are studying language and literature in the Faculty of Language and Literature. Now you are asking, okay, what is really interesting to me in order to, for example, carry out investigation on that, or how it really interests me to work on that. So once you are providing an answer to this question, so the answer to this question is basically providing that broad area for your research investigation. So now you are done with the first step. The first step is generally you're asking, okay, what area is really interesting and what dimension should I work? So not really that specific dimensions. So suppose that you generally decide that I have to work on some issues or problems or difficulties associated, for example, with the members of society. Then you decide, for example, language. You can start, or you can decide, for example, about political system or many other things. So this is the first step. Simply, or in very simple language, the first step is just you're thinking to yourself, okay, what is really interesting to me, that I have to do a research investigation on that. Once you're providing answer to this question, so that could provide that broad area of, for example, your research investigation. Second, suppose that you have already decided that I have to carry out investigation on language. So now the second step is dissect the broad area. Means that you have to divide that broad area into many sub areas, into many, for example, subtitles. Okay, what dimension of language? About phonology, morphology, syntax, language and society, language variation, depth of language, history of language. What dimension of language? So suppose that above in step first, so you have identified that I am really interested to carry out a research investigation on language. Now down, you are categorizing language into many subfields or sub-branches or many sub-areas. For example, history of language, phonology of language, syntax of language, morphology of language, for example, phonology of language. Many other branches or many other dimensions of language are there that you can talk about them. So this is the second step, that you are basically decomposing your broad field into subfield, or you can, for example, classify, or you have to go through sub branches for that particular broad area. So now the order says dissect the broad area into sub areas. Right, that broad area was language. Now you come to sub areas. So sub areas could be any of the mentioned dimension of language that I told you. So The author says at the onset, you will realize that all the broad areas mentioned above that I mentioned, right? For example, specifically in your book is also there youth welfare, refugees, domestic violence, consumer behavior, HIV or AIDS have many aspects or sub areas, right? Even if we are talking about AIDS, we can talk about the transmission of AIDS, how AIDS is transmitted from one person to another person, or how, for example, fatal it is, and how people are infected. So many dimensions are there, or how to control, or how to, for example, protect ourselves. So many dimensions are there. So suppose that we are providing an example of subject area, or for example we can say broad area and sub area. Suppose that this is the subject area. We would like to carry out an investigation on domestic violence, خشونت‌های خانوادگی, or DV. So the first thing, or the first step that you do is you are really interested to carry out an investigation on domestic violence. So now what are the sub areas? Because domestic violence itself is very broad topic, so you cannot carry out an investigation on this. So you have to categorize, or you have to actually dissect it or divide it into many sub areas. So what are the sub areas? So here, look here. So you decided to carry out an investigation on domestic violence, or DV. Now, what are the aspects or sub areas of this domestic violence? Now, you start profile of families in which DV occurs. Okay, what type of families are usually, for example, exercising DV or domestic violence? Whether they are, for example, poor, rich, they are educated, they are uneducated. So what? So second aspect of the same broad areas, we can say profile of the victims of DV. Okay, those people who are receiving DV, what kind of people they are? They are very humble, maybe they are very poor, maybe they are, for example, uneducated, or what? And similarly, profile of the perpetrators, those people who are actually committing or perpetrating domestic violence, what type of people they are? They are, for example, rich, they are poor, maybe they are educated, they are, for example, uneducated. What kind of family do they belong in terms of social status, and many other things. And then we are coming to reasons for DV, why domestic violence takes place, and then extended types of DV. So how many types of DV is so far no one in common to our country. Impact of DV on the family. So does it really fix the problems of a family, or maybe it destroys or eliminates the entire relationship between the family? As a result, that relationship is gone or is lost. And next here, we have got impact of DV on children. For example, if DV takes place, for example, in a family, does it really affect on children? If yes, how it affects? So many dimensions are there. And then services available to the victims of DV. Okay, if a person is receiving, for example, violence by members of their family, so what services are, for example, there to be provided for them? Maybe it could be through the government, could be through the society or community members, so many others. Then you're looking for each one. Next, effectiveness of the services provided to the victims of DV. For example, suppose that here are lots of DV service providers, but we are not sure whether these services that they are provided to the receivers of the domestic violence, are they really effective and beneficial to the victim or not? Or extent of DV in a community. So how severe the domestic violence which is exercised in the community or society is. So see, we have got many aspects, many dimensions. Now it is not really possible, and even it is not feasible to start carrying out investigation on domestic violence unless you are dividing, unless you are dissecting domestic violence into its smaller or sub areas. For example, as we had here, profile of families in which DV occurs, profile of the victim, so up to the end. Now, there could be many other dimensions. So probably you can add to these numbers. I mean, this is not the whole story. You can add lots of other, for example, dimensions or aspects or sub areas that you can think of. So now it is very easy, for example, that you have dissected your broad or general area or subject area into sub areas. You can pick out one, for example. You can choose profile of families in which DV occurs. So you can start working on this. Or maybe you can come down profile of the victims of DV. Or suppose that if you think that profile of families in which DV occurs is very narrowed, maybe so you need to do more. So you can choose two sub areas also. You can say profile of families in which DV occurs and profile of the victims of DV, for example. You can choose two sub areas that they are closely related to one another. So this was an example of the second step in which we say that it is not really possible to directly start working or directly start investigation on your broad area. Rather, you have to dissect or decompose your broad area into sub areas. So what you have done is categorizing, or you can say dissecting your subject areas into sub areas. And here you can choose one or two and then start exactly working on them. So step 3, select what is of most interest to you. Right. So in step 2, what you did was simply you dissected your broad areas into sub areas. But here you just look into all of those, for example, sub areas, and then the one you think is really of high interest to you, you're just picking it out or you're choosing it, and then you start working on that. So select what is of the most interest to you. It is neither advisable nor feasible to study all sub-areas, right? So of course, we looked into domestic violence. It has got lots of, for example, dimensions and sub areas. It is not really possible for you to carry out investigation on all sub areas. Rather, you're choosing one or two, and then you're starting work, and then you start working on them. So out of this list, select issues or sub areas about which you are passionate, that you are interested. And if you remember long ago, I said interest is very important because when you're carrying out an investigation, it really takes time. If you are not interested, so you cannot continue or you cannot keep up working on your topic or title. So it is very important to mind that whether you're interested or not. If you're not interested in a title or topic, so never select that and never start working on that. And step 4, now raise research questions. Right. You have identified a problem and you say that, okay, this is a problem. Domestic violence is a problem in our community or in our society. Now you are raising research question. What is the difference between research question and research problem? Research problem, as its name is self-explanatory, that is a problem, that is an issue, that is a difficulty, like DV, domestic violence, that is a problem. But research question is a question about that problem. So you can say that, okay, is education related to, for example, domestic violence? Now, this is a kind of question which is related to, for example, that research problem that we have already asked. Now, the first step is raise research question, means that ask your question basically. So we can say, ask yourself, what is it that I want to find out about in this sub area? Right. For example, you would like to actually work on the relationship between basically education and DV or domestic violence. So now you're simply asking you that is education related to DV or not? So this is a kind of question that you have in mind and you're asking question, and then throughout this question, throughout this research, you're sticking to this question. So maybe you have got lots of questions. So generally we have kind of main questions and also like sub questions, or we may have major questions and minor questions. So generally as a rule of thumb, we may have one major question, two or three minor questions, and a research investigation. So now we are coming to step 5, formulate objectives. Right, objectives. Both your main objectives and your sub-objectives now need to be formulated, which grow out of your research question. So now you have asked actually questions related to your research problem, particularly is education related to, for example, the level or rate of domestic violence? So that was a question. Now, objectives are those operational steps or those behavioral steps that you are exactly doing. So it could be anything. So you are simply saying that, okay, the objective of this study is to show or to determine or to find out whether education is related, sorry, DV, what domestic violence is related to education or not. So I want to show to you that if somebody is more educated, then what is the level of DV, for example, or domestic violence that the person is committing, or maybe the relationship is quite vice versa. So just I would like to show. So research question and research objectives are not very much different. The only difference is here objectives are operational steps, something that you can do. And particularly, you are using some action verbs like I'm going to show you, I'm going to, for example, determine, I'm going to examine the relationship between two or things. And moreover, in terms of structure, when we say research question is question. But research objectives are statements. They are usually positive, and they are usually, for example, in the form of statements that they contain action verbs. Action verbs are showing as operational things, like we can do, where we can operationalize things. So, and here the same thing, the author says the main difference between objectives in the search question is the way in which they are written. Right, I already said. When we are talking about research question, they are written in the question form and in interrogative form. However, when we are writing, for example, objectives are usually written in positive forms or in positive structures. So here the author says research questions are obviously questions. Objectives transform these questions into behavioral aims or operational, for example, steps by using action-oriented words such as to find out, to determine, to ascertain, to examine. So these are what I already talked about them. So next, some researchers prefer to reverse the process. Right, what we did, we actually formulated our research question and we derived our objectives from our research question. But some other researchers initially they formulate their objectives, then they derive their research questions from their objectives. So that is quite possible. That is quite possible. I mean, that is optional. It depends on the rules and regulation of your institution. Just follow or stick to the rules and regulation of your institution. So here the author says some researchers prefer to reverse the process. That is, they start from objectives and formulate research questions from them, right? But ours was quite vice versa. We formulated our research question and we derived our objectives from research questions. So next, some researchers are satisfied only with research questions and do not formulate objectives at all, right? That is also possible. I mean, it is not quite, for example, necessary or is required, quite required to have both research question and research objectives, depending upon your understanding. So you can have an objective drive your questions because questions are, in my opinion, little bit more specific. So question is basically about your objectives. Once you are formulating your once you are deciding your research problem, then in order to limit your research problem, then you are coming to what? Research question. Then in order to operationalize or in order to find answers to your question, you are proposing some operational steps, which is called objectives, what we call it objectives. So for that, objective is much more objective, means something physical, something which is doable, something which is feasible. So in which we are using action oriented verbs like to determine, to find out, to examine, to show, all these things. And next, if you prefer to have only the search question or only objectives, this is fine, but keep in mind the requirements of your institution for research proposals. So that is what I told you. Sometimes it is not really a must to have both of them. You can have one, but you have to keep or take the rules and regulation of your institution into account. If they require, so you can include both of them. In case they are not, for example, requiring you, you can have one of them. Now, coming to step 6, assess your objectives, right? You have set your objectives and you have derived your objectives from your research question. Now, it is the time to actually look into your objectives. Whether is it possible to actually do or operationalize the objectives that you have set? Is it really doable? Can you collect data on the same objective? It means that can you physically do that? Now examine your objectives in the light of the time, resources like final and human resources, and technical expertise at your disposal to ascertain the feasibility of achieving them through your research endeavor. Right. You have set particular objectives. Now, look at your financial resources and look at your time and look at, for example, your technical knowledge. Okay, this objective, is it really possible to, for example, provide the money which is to be expended, for example, where to be spent, or the amount of time that you have? Suppose that you have, for example, a 1 month time. Is it really possible to wind up everything within a month? And then, moreover, you are, for example, a student in the field of social science. Is it really possible to actually carry out this objectives or this investigation with this aim, goal, and objectives? So these are all the things that you have to assess. You have to look again to these things. And then step 7, double check. Double check means that now go back from the very first step, cross check, and think of every step deeply and profoundly. So the way you have, for example, formulated your research question, your research problem, you have set your objectives in many things. Is it really possible for you? This is the very final step. You are finalizing. So whatever consideration or concern you have to cross check. So in order to make sure we're certain that you are able to actually do these steps or to do, for example, this research investigation. So now, this is an example which contains the 7 steps. It has briefed up, or it provides you a summary of the entire steps that we have studied or elaborate on them. So step 1, identify. You are simply identifying here, right? For example, you would like to actually carry out investigation about alcoholism. Now step 2, dissect alcoholism into its dimension, into its, for example, doable, or for example, into small parts, which is testable, which is measurable. Now dissect. Number 1, profile of alcoholics and the cause of alcoholism, the process of becoming an alcoholic, the effect of alcoholism on the family, community attitudes towards alcoholism, the effectiveness of a treatment mode. So you can pick up, for example, each of, well, for example, any of them you want if it is interested to you. Then you are moving on to the step 3, which is exactly you're choosing 1, effects of alcoholism on the family. So you have chosen, for example, number 4. And then step 4, raise question. What impacts has alcoholism on marital relation? How does it affect the various aspects of children's lives? What are the effect on the family finance? So these are your research questions. And then down here, step 5, you are formulating your objectives. See, these are questions, but now you are making or driving your objectives from these questions. So main objectives: to find out the effects of alcoholism on the family, specific on the family. Look here, what impact has alcoholism on the marital relations? Marital relation, in fact, this is a kind of family. For example, when a person is, for example, married, then definitely he has a family. So marital relation means that the family, the relationship between the members of the family, specifically men and women. And then here are specific objectives. The first one is a little bit more general. So down, number 1, 2, 3, they are a little bit more specific. To ascertain the impact of alcoholism on marital relation, to determine the ways in which alcoholism affects the different aspects of children's lives, to find out the effects of alcoholism on the financial situation of the family, etc. Now coming to step 6, make sure now you're assessing specifically your objectives concerning or with regard to the time, money, and expertise you have, or the background knowledge that you have. So the work involved. So what work you're going to do? Are you able to do all those things? So the time available to you, the financial resource, and also the depending upon the knowledge or expertise of yourself and your supervisor. And step 7, now you're double checking the entire process or the entire steps. So ranging from identification of the broad area up to the section of the sub areas, and then selecting one, and then raising question up to many things in order to make sure that the process that you have taken into consideration are really doable and feasible. You can do them. So the formulation of research objectives. Now, objectives should be listed under two headings. Generally, we have main objectives, and then we have like we can say sub-objectives, where we can say even minor objectives. Main objective is the objective which is the central focus of your research study. However, sub-objectives are somehow they are related. While you are looking for your main objectives, then you may touch upon some other objectives that they are not really primary or main, but in order to be able to actually achieve your main or primary objectives, so you need to touch upon them. And usually we are numerically numbering them one, two, three, something like that. So while we are formulating our objectives, we have to use action-oriented words. As I already told you, like to find out, to ascertain, to measure, to explore, to determine, to examine. So these are all action-oriented verbs. And then next, the way the main objectives and sub-objectives are worded determines how your research is classified, descriptive, correlational, or experimental, right? So the author says that this is also very important to actually word your objectives in a proper way to show whether the type of research that you have chosen is correlational, is descriptive, experimental, or what. It should specify, or it should tell us. It should tell about the nature of your investigation. Irrespective of the type of research, the objectives should be expressed in such a way that the wording clearly, completely, and specifically communicate to your readers your intention, both in terms of wording and ideas. Right. The author says doesn't matter so what the nature of your investigation is, whether that is correlational, whether that is descriptive, prescriptive, so whatever. So it should be, or the wording which is used should be clear, it should be complete, and should be very specific. It should tell us without any ambiguity, without any doubt, it should transfer the ideas to your audience. Now here, for example, these are the properties. So if you would like to carry out a descriptive study here, so you should have these three blocks. It should be clear, complete, and specific. But if you would like to actually carry out correlational studies, it means that to establish a relationship between two facts or two phenomena, in that case you have to add one more, identify the main variable. For example, you can say, oh, DV violence is related to education. If somebody has less education, then he is committing more DV, or we can say, for example, domestic violence. If somebody, so whatever. And third one, we have got if you are testing a hypothesis, it means that if you have, for example, two variables, in that case, the property of your objective, it should be clear, complete, specific, and it should have one variable, and also it should have another variable. If we do not have two variables, so we are not able to actually show the direction of, for example, the direction of that investigation. For example, we can say, if you have more education, then you commit less domestic violence. If you have less, for example, education, then you commit more, for example, domestic violence. Now the direction is clear. So as much as you're educated, then you're going to a particular direction. As much as you're less educated, then you're going to another direction. So this is the idea. But one more thing I would like to tell you here. When we are testing a hypothesis is usually composed and is usually formulated and tested when we have two variables. When we have two factors, that the two factors are in one way or another related to one another. For example, if you have more education, then you will commit less domestic violence. So that way. So they study population. Now, another thing that we have, I mean, this is a very common and is a very important part of a research investigation is study population. So the study population is the aspect of a social research study from whom we required information, or whom the required information is obtained to find answers to your research question. Then a study population means that the person or thing from which you are collecting data, from which you are, for example, collecting information. So study population can be people if you're collecting data from people. It could be things. So from if in case you are collecting data from which. then a study population can be that aspect or that dimension of a social study from which we are collecting information or data. So establishing operational definition, right? For example, you would like to say, I am going to carry out an investigation about, for example, domestic violence. Now you have to give me an operational definition or working definition. What do you really mean by domestic? So you mean domestic, so any violence which is taking place at home, not out of home. So this is one operational definition. And next, when I'm saying violence, okay, what do you really mean by violence? Violence, does it really means physical punishment, or even it refers to oral punishment or lingual punishment when you're using foul language? That is also violence. Now you are giving me operational definition. You say, okay, violence refers to using foul language as well as physical punishment. Now it is clear for me. So the good point about operational definition is that definition or working definition you are giving me, it may not apply to, for example, the work of the others. It is specific to your work. So the implication, the meaning, and operationalization of these definitions are specific to your own work. So even the meaning that you have provided to me, it may be different from the meanings given in the, for example, legal definition or in the dictionary. So that is the idea or the concept of operational definitions. So the operational definition you gave are specific to your work. Yes, I said. So maybe domestic in your work means something else. It is quite different from the domestic of from the meaning of domestic which is given in some other work or works. Examples for establishing operational definition, right? Now, how we are operationalizing, how we are providing operational definition. So the main objectives are, look, to find out the number of children living below the poverty line in Australia. So now we have got many concepts here, children and poverty line, which are in italic. So now, to ascertain the impact of immigration on family roles, now here we have got family role and immigrants, again, two concepts. Three, so to measure the effectiveness of retraining program designed to help young people. Now young people and effectiveness here. Now look down how we are providing operational definition for our objectives. Number one, see here we had like children in poverty line. Now number one here we have got poverty line. What do really we mean by poverty line? Now we have to provide information about poverty line. What constitutes poverty line? Okay, what causes poverty line? Or simply it means what is poverty line? So we are providing a definition, operational definition for our audience. By poverty line, we mean this. For example, if the income of people is below 5,000 per month, now we can say those people are below poverty line. Okay, that is fine. That is operational definition. And now children, what people are children? So this is study population. Now we say, who would you consider a child? Okay, you can say you are providing an operational definition. You're saying, okay, population that they are below, for example, 10 years, they are considered children in my study, but they may not be considered children in other studies because the operational definition you're providing is specific to your work. And again here, family roles. What constitute family roles? It simply means what is family role? You're providing an operational definition. And then immigrants. What do you really mean by immigrants? Who are immigrants? Okay, who would you consider an immigrant? And next, effectiveness. This is also a concept. Then what constitutes effectiveness? You're just providing a definition, operational definition. Effectiveness is what? And then study population, the young. So when we say the young people, what do we really mean by young people? So down, you must operationalize the concept. See, poverty line, family rules, effectiveness. These are all concepts. And moreover, children, immigrants, the young. Also, you have to actually change them into into operational definition or into operational concepts. So you have to give us some operational definition. So here you must operationalize the concepts, define in practical, observable and measurable terms. Poverty line. Okay, as I already told you, if a person doesn't have income or their income or his income or her income is below 5,000 per month, then he or she is considered, for example, a poor person. So that refers to the idea of poverty line that you have operationalized. It means that practically you have given us definition. That is quite observable because we go and count the amount of money that he earns. And then that is quite measurable also. And then operationalize the study population again. For example, here, these are all study population, and these are the concepts which are associated with this study population. Now, you operationalize the study population, you define in identifiable terms, children. Okay, so you have to identify what people are called children. Immigrants, what people are called immigrants. And then the young, what people are young. So everything should be clear here. So that is the idea of operationalizing the concepts in a study population into measurable terms and into observable, and even we can say into practical way. So formulating a research problem in qualitative research, right? So here specifically we are talking how we are formulating a research problem in a qualitative research. So if you remember, we long back discussed qualitative research, and we say that it deals with text. It simply writes about something, where it talks about a problem in word rather than, for example, numbers or statistics. So here, the difference in qualitative and quantitative studies is with the way you formulate your research problem, right? So what we get from this, when we are formulating a research problem is very important. It basically tells us whether our research is qualitative or quantitative. Thus, it is very important to take into account how to appropriately formulate our research problem in order to meet the requirement of either of, for example, the types of research. So in quantitative research, you try to be as specific as possible, right? In quantitative, because we are dealing with numbers, so we are definitely as specific as possible. We try to narrow the magnitude. The magnitude or means the extent of our research study, and to develop a framework within which you can find your research or your investigation. However, on the other hand, in qualitative research, you try to maintain flexibility, openness, and freedom to include any new ideas or exclude any aspects considered not to be relevant. Right. See, in quantitative research, you are as specific as possible. It means that you're simply providing, for example, a questionnaire. Then when you are counting the number of yes, I agree, I strongly agree, or something like that. So you're simply counting. Numbers are specific. However, while you're conducting or carrying out qualitative research, so it is flexible. It means that you start working up to some, for example, point, and then you reach another agreement, and you notice that okay, the way you have worked is not correct. Then simply you are, for example, removing that section in again because you have got a new idea. Now, sticking to your new idea, you carry out investigation in a very flexible way. You change, for example, somewhere in the middle of your investigation, and maybe even you change, for example, your conclusion. That is also quite possible. So qualitative research primarily employs deductive reasoning, means that we start from general and we move to specific. So deductive is a kind of reasoning that you generally begin from very broad area and then you are narrowing it down. I will provide you some example down. So quantitative research is quite opposite, which is using inductive reasoning, means that you start from data or you start from trivial or minor things, then at the end of your investigation you generalize or you provide a conclusion. So in qualitative research you start from general and move to, for example, details. However, in quantitative research you start from details and then you are moving to generalization or something general. So that is the difference between the two. So here I have provided a diagram for you. So the first one is inductive. You begin from a specific observation, means that you start from data here. Then you provide a pattern, for example, okay, how common this problem is, and then you generalize or you conclude. However, while you are conducting a deductive reasoning, that you start from general, you begin from a theory. Theory is something general. Then you formulate your hypotheses, you collect data, then you analyze data, and then you either reject or accept the hypothesis. So generally we can say in inductive reasoning, you start from a specific information or details, and then you go to conclusion. But deductive research or a research which is used or which is, for example, worked on in the framework of deductive, you start from general and then going to a specific. So it means that you're going to data or information. Okay, inductive, the author says, here I have provided you an example. Inductive. There are three steps in inductive reasoning. Means that when you are starting from details. See, what is the detail here? A female junior student has problem in research methodology. This is a detail because maybe in a class there are 20 girls, but out of those 20 girls only one female junior student actually had problem in research methodology. So I have observed, I have collected data. Now what is it do? The 20 girls observed had problem in research methodology. Oh, all these girls had problem in research methodology. So I have provided a pattern. Now the pattern is that most of the girls have problem in research methodology. Now we are concluding. Develop a theory or general conclusion. All female juniors have problem in research methodology. See, I started from very detailed. One girl, and then I provided a pattern which are 20 girls, and then I concluded. I said all girls have problem. But this pattern is quite reversed while we are conducting a qualitative research. Down here, a detective research approach consists of the following stage. Now, number one, we start with an existing theory. Means that we start from very general problem or general thing. We can say all female juniors have problem in research methodology. See, we started from general. Then coming down, we formulate a feasible hypothesis based on existing theory. We say female juniors don't have any motivation for studying research methodology, in that they have problem in research methodology. So this is a hypothesis. We will work on this hypothesis and see whether this hypothesis is correct or wrong. No matter whether it is correct or wrong, so both are really valuable. If I show that females do not have motivation, that is also a kind of investigation. And if I'm showing that okay, motivation and for example the laziness of female students are related, if I'm showing that they are related, is also a kind of investigation. If I'm showing that these two factors are not related, also that is a kind of investigation. So the third step, we collect data to test this hypothesis, whether the two factors are related or not. And then we collected data, and finally we have found, we analyzed the data and tested the data, and then 2 out of 30 female juniors have not problem in research methodology. So I have found that maybe the 30 girls or maybe the 20 girls that were there, 2 out of them actually didn't have any problem, but most of the girls had problem. So decide whether you can reject the null hypothesis or not. Now the hypothesis, I say that okay, most of the girls were all girls. Now it is clear. 20 out of 30 students did not have problem. So if 20 out of 30 students did not have problem, the hypothesis is wrong, because most of the girls do not have problem. But in case we have, for example, find that 2 out of 30 students have problem, or maybe most of them have problem, so in that case the hypothesis that we have composed is either coming true or false. See, one thing, I have provided you here a practical example which is quite tentative. See, suppose that in here maybe you got confused at 20 because above we had 2 out of 30. If 2 out of 30 students female or female students have not problem in research methodology, then this generalization is wrong. We cannot say all females, right? Because only 2 out of 30 female juniors have problem or not have problem. Yeah, if I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. If our generalization is all female juniors have problem in research methodology, in case that our finding is something like this, 2 out of 30 female juniors have not problem, this is right, because only 2 people do not have problem, then 28 other girls they have problem, then this generalization is right. But down here, if 20 out of 30 students did not have problem, then this generalization is wrong. because we said all female juniors were most of female juniors. So now 20 out of 30 students did not have problems. So how it is fine, right? So anyway, today it is just the idea, or basically we are stating to the, or we are sticking to the concept of deductive research approach. We will be talking about hypothesis, whether in which case hypothesis is correct, in which case, for example, that hypothesis is wrong. We will be talking about that. Simply, you can say the first step is we make a generalization. Second step, we formulate a hypothesis. Then we collect data, analyze the data, and then we decide whether our hypothesis is right or wrong. So here, this is your assignment. What do you do? The first, choose a title. Two, analyze it into sub areas. Choose the sub areas as your research topic. Formulate your research question. So that is your assignment. You have to do this assignment, and then I will definitely check them. And then in case exercise on formulation of research question, so you have to actually formulate a research question on, as I have already mentioned there, on those topics. And then in case you have any question, you can drop me a message, or when we personally meet, you can ask me. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Wish you all the best. Bye bye. See you.